God said what? I mean, what did he say? And because I learned to flow debates and I understood rhetoric and argument, I would be trying to write down, Miss Luther, what you doing? Don't be writing in church. You can't write, you can't think, you can't move, you can't chew, you can't, what do you do here? You just sit like this. And so as I grew up a little bit more, went to college, I was very defiant about it. And that's why I said to you all, I would have been the last person they ever would have thought would leave the church, because they were just like, she don't care about nothing, you know. And I really didn't. I was just very I was smarter than them, and I was prideful about it, Chris. I was like, they don't know nothing, they old, they smell funny, you know, they wear these blue little hair and wigs, and all the old ladies would sit on the Willing Workers Club, and the other men would sit on this side. And it just seemed like the world was just going faster than the church. And so I guess God was seeing something in me that says, here's a leader. But I was saying, and my parents were saying, she's a rebel, you know, because she doesn't want to do what. But something happened to me actually before I got to college, before I got to high school. Well, I was right before high school and before college and all of that. I had an experience, but I didn't know what the experience meant. Not till many, many, many years later, my grandmother took me on a bus from West Palm Beach, Florida to Brooklyn, New York. And we went to New York looking for my Aunt Evelyn, who just passed away this past February, and she was my favorite aunt. I loved her. When she was young, probably about 18, she was my keeper. My mother worked with my grandmother at the Post Times, cooking food for their lunch service. So my mother would leave me. I was born to a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, so I was a daughter of a teen mom. And so I was kind of whisked around to all the people in the family to keep, and my Aunt Evelyn would keep me during the day while my mother and my grandmother worked. And my father were not married. They wouldn't be married till 4 years later when he graduated from college. He went to Bethune-Cookman College. Mom stayed home because she was only 16, worked and kept me. And so Aunt Evelyn would be my keeper. So I would follow her around everywhere she went. She went to different places, and so she became the love of my life. I love my Aunt Evelyn. I still did to the day she died. And what I found out was I would say to myself, wherever Aunt Evelyn goes, I'm going to go. Whatever she does, you know how you have a person in your family you really like. You're like, ooh, they cool, or they this, or they that. You just like Pookie. He just got a big old car. He wears flat clothes, and so you're like, ooh, I like that. Well, she was like that. She could dance. She could do all this stuff. And so I was like, okay, whatever Aunt Evelyn does, I'm going to do. Well, then right in the middle of life, she got saved. And so she wasn't fly, and she wasn't cool, and she wasn't dancing, and she wasn't blinging, and she didn't have all the stuff together. She started not doing her hair. She had no makeup on. She put on a long dress. I'm like, ew, like what? And so she didn't just get saved. She got Holy Ghost saved. She was like speaking in tongues and rolling on the floor and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh man, you just really messed up my game plan. Because my game plan was that we were just going to probably get an apartment together in New York and do something great. And I was just going to follow her the rest of my life and be like her. And so when she got saved, she left West Palm Beach and went to Brooklyn. And so this trip, I'm 12 years old, and I'm going with my grandmother to New York on the bus to find her, because for 3 years we didn't know where she was. She was just lost in the sauce in this church thing. And my grandmother was like, maybe Adame said, she was like an Italian mobster. She would cut you. She would fight you. She was an old lady fighting people out in the street and stuff like that. She was just crazy, and people were scared of her. They called her Big Cheese. And so Big Cheese didn't play her. She walked in, my granddaddy almost got the beat down for getting my mother pregnant because Big Cheese didn't play that. And so she was always, she was just a rough rider. We called her she wouldn't take tea for fever. And she carried a knife. Wherever she went, she always had a knife. And so don't play with Big Cheese. So we're going to New York to find Aunt Evelyn, because she's been lost, or she hadn't heard from her own child in 3 years. And by this time, I'm like, well, I want to see my Aunt Evelyn. I haven't seen her in so long. We get to New York, and we find her in church, in some church somewhere in Brooklyn. And Pilgrim Baptist Church, I believe. And Bishop Brown, or Pastor Brown at the time, was a pastor, and they was having prayer day. And at prayer day, you don't eat all day. This was fasting, which was new, because I grew up in AME church. Who fasts in AME church? You don't fast. So we got to Brooklyn, and they were fasting, and my grandmother was like, these folk are crazy. Do you see they ain't got no food all day? She said, honey, your gut cussing. And I said, yes, Grandma, my gut cussing, because she would say, if your gut was cussing, you need to eat no matter what nobody else doing. So we left the church and we went to get some hot dogs and some somewhere, and they was all the ladies in white, and there was thousands of people in this church. But something happened to me that day. I just figured God just said, oh, you desired for something for my life. We got back to the church that day, and they had this big, it would have been this big wire thing. It's about this big against the wall, and you roll it around, and people would come up, and they would put their prayer requests in there. I never heard of prayer requests. I went to Amy Church, so I know about prayer requests. Didn't know about fasting, didn't know about baptism, didn't know about none of that. I mean, we didn't do all of that. And so they had this big grid thing that you turn around with all the prayer requests. And we got back to the church that afternoon. Our stomachs were full. They gave you a piece of paper about this big, and everybody got in the church, and they asked you to put your prayer request in and to put it in the big barrel. And I was standing there by myself to the side of the church where this was, and I was looking at that big barrel, and I was saying, my prayer request. And I wrote it. I wrote down one word, and I put everybody could go up at different times and put it in the barrel. And I didn't know for years and years how that one thing that I asked for at Pilgrim Prayer Day, that day when I was 12 years old, would change my life. I really didn't even know it even when I got back to West Palm Beach, and I was still rebellious. And even while I was in Brooklyn, and I was still there, they wanted to baptize me. And I'm like, I don't want to be baptized. I don't want to do this. And my aunt Evelyn was saying you need to be saved. Well, what is saved? I mean, I don't know. And so she was talking about all this stuff, and Grandma was like, girl, don't worry about it. Just say yeah. Just say anything, because we're going to get up out of here in a minute. Because that was how Big Cheese was. She felt like salvation and Holy Ghost and being filled with the Spirit and talking in tongues was for cutthroats, bad people who really had done stuff wrong in their life. She didn't feel like the average person really needed God like that. If you went to church, you was fine. If you went on Sunday and gave some an offering, put your dollar in, you was good. She didn't feel like you needed to do that. But my Aunt Evelyn and Pastor Brown was pressing me because they kept saying they could see something in me. And I'm like, see what? And they're like, we see something in you. You really need to have Jesus as your Savior. So I said something. I don't know what it was. They were saying, say, if you believe God in your heart and you really believe you could be a better person, just ask him to come into your heart. He'll be your Savior or something like that. And I still didn't know saved from what or saved about what, but I did it. And they baptized me in the bathtub at Pastor Brown's house that weekend. I got saved. I've had my little word that nobody knew yet in the prayer thing, and I went back to Florida, and I was still just and my aunt said she went down a dry devil and she came up a wet devil. So I was still mean and just to myself and very selfish, and I don't think anything happened. I really don't, because my heart wasn't in it. I really didn't care. Again, I told you I was just focused on me. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have money. I wanted to marry somebody very rich, and that was it. I didn't want to care about anybody else. And so when I went to Clark College, this thing that had happened at 12, I'm about 16 now, was still on me somehow. I don't know what happened, but this word that I had put inside this thing was probably, I believe God hears prayer. Now I do, because he must have heard that one, because it was what I asked for. And it was just following me, this prayer cloud, this support of God to give me what I had asked for that day in Brooklyn at 12. I'm 16 now, I got all these problems. You all heard my testimony about being pregnant and abortions and all this stuff is going on. And I'm like, life is just a wreck. I don't know, but I'm smart as a whip. I do nothing but read books. So books are keeping my mind, but I'm governor of Girl State. I'm very popular with this person and doing this, and my mind is still very selfish. And I'm still going on through all this, but I have this prayer request I asked God for at 12. And so I get to Clark College in Atlanta. I'm a freshman. All this stuff is going on. I'm still having problems with my life. I'm dating the wrong person. I'm loving the wrong person. I'm having sex with the wrong people. I'm drinking, but I can hold it good so nobody knows it. I can just do all this stuff so well, but inside I'm just a wreck. I'm just falling apart because My parents are not smart enough, and the church is not smart enough to help me because I'm smarter than them. So I really don't know where my help's going to come from, because